Terrifying alien monsters invade Earth. The soldiers scatter in fear and run away. Suddenly, an armored vehicle arrives to provide support. Everyone cheered excitedly. However, in the next moment, the soldiers concentrate their fire and shoot wildly, only to be pierced through their bodies by the monster's tail spikes. The remaining soldiers can only shoot while retreating. Suddenly, several bombs parachute down from above. However, this raid only kills a handful of monsters. The intelligent monsters, seeking revenge, gather a large force to launch an attack on the human base. They ignore the hail of bullets and the bombardment, climbing over 100-meter-high walls, to prepare for a deadly battle with humans. This American sci-fi film, with intense fight scenes, is full of excitement throughout. The story begins. On Christmas night, David and his daughter sit in front of the TV watching the World Cup. Just as one side is about to shoot, the screen suddenly fills with snowflakes. At this moment, the lights at the World Cup venue go out completely. In the next second, a suddenly appearing wormhole shocks everyone. A large number of armed soldiers emerge from the wormhole. The leading woman stated that they have traveled from 25 years in the future. The future world is filled with battlefields covered in smoke. This is because a large number of alien monsters want to conquer Earth. The number of surviving humans is less than 400,000. If left unchecked, humanity will surely face extinction. They came here this time to seek reinforcements. Since the World Cup is being broadcast live, people all over the world are aware of this. In order for human civilization to continue, many soldiers are sent to the future to fight. However, very few return after 7 days, yet the war is far from over. For this reason, countries around the world unite, launching the first global conscription. There are no age limits, and no gender distinctions. As long as they meet the criteria, everyone must do their part. That day, David is in class at school. The students lack confidence in the future. After all, every 7 days, a group of people is sent to support the battlefield, but less than 1 in 10 returns alive. Just then, David suddenly received a conscription text message. He went for a physical examination on site. After placing his arm on the device, all of David's information appeared on the screen. Even his date of death could be determined. He learned that he would die in 8 years. The examiner told him he met the criteria very well. Then, a teleportation device was installed on David's arm, and he was told it couldn't be removed until he completed his military service. After that, David headed to the training base. There were many people here who had no idea how to fight. They needed to undergo a week-long crash course. David was fortunate, because he had been to the battlefield 15 years ago. He was also appointed as the squad leader. Then everyone learned about the situation on the future battlefield, and gained a preliminary understanding of firearms. However, they encountered an emergency at night. Due to the urgency of the situation, they needed to rush to the battlefield immediately. The wormhole opened before everyone understood the situation. Just as most people were being transported, a soldier reported that there was a problem with the teleportation coordinates. They needed to stop the teleportation immediately, but it was too late for that. When the people transported to the future opened their eyes, they found themselves at an altitude of 10,000 meters. Then, they began to free fall rapidly. Many people died from the fall. However, David and a few others fortunately landed in a rooftop pool. The survivors stood on the rooftop and looked down, only to find that alien monsters were devouring the humans on the ground. The situation in the future world was far worse than they had imagined. What made them feel even more helpless was that tens of thousands had been sent over, but before the battle even began, only a handful remained. At this moment, the commander contacted David, stating that their next mission was very difficult. They needed to locate a fallen laboratory and obtain the latest developed pathogen to combat the monsters. They had only 6 minutes to act, and when the time was up, the building would be blown up. Then David led everyone to the laboratory. Inside, there were tail spikes shot by the monsters everywhere, and none of the researchers had survived. Someone even deliberately pulled out a tail spike as a souvenir. Fortunately, they quickly found the pathogen. Then everyone carefully evacuated via the stairs. Suddenly, a strange noise came from above. Everyone tensed up, staring at the source of the sound. Before anyone could react, someone was hit by the monster's tail spike. The others immediately concentrated their fire on the monster. However, the gunfire woke up more monsters. Even though they had heavy firepower, the monsters were tough-skinned and thick-fleshed, and the bullets couldn't harm them at all. Moreover, their tail spikes had a very high hit rate, and were extremely fast. Everyone could only shoot while retreating. After finally escaping the stairwell, the soldier at the back was preparing to close the door, to block the monster, only to be knocked away by the monster's headbutt. Seeing this, David shot frantically, but the monster still dragged the soldier away. Then another monster rushed out, and David immediately emptied his magazine, quickly pulling out his pistol to continue shooting, until all his bullets were gone. The monster still hadn't died. Just then, David noticed a fire axe nearby, so he immediately took it down, and chopped at the monster. He actually didn't hit it. At the moment the monster opened its mouth to bite, the axe successfully lodged into its mouth. The monster grabbed David with its tentacles, and slammed him against the wall. At a critical moment, a teammate rushed back to help. They directly shot and killed the monster. The man had been to the battlefield several times before, and he knew that the monster's neck and abdomen lacked protective skin. After informing David, they quickly evacuated. Soon, they escaped the building. Seeing a rescue armored vehicle, they rushed towards it. The monsters quickly followed in pursuit. At this point, they were getting closer to the armored vehicle. Suddenly, a large number of monsters charged out, flipping the armored vehicle, and pulling out the driver inside to gnaw on him. David and the others immediately opened fire, but they were surprised to find that the monsters had intelligence. They would hide behind the vehicle, waiting for the right moment to strike. When the time was right, they shot countless tail spikes in retaliation. David's squad suffered heavy casualties, with very few members remaining. Just then, the bombers arrived at their designated location, and quickly dropped several bombs. David shouted for his teammates to evacuate. They then climbed over the railing, and entered the tunnel. However, due to the unique design of the tunnel, one soldier accidentally missed his step and fell. David immediately jumped down to save him. The other team members followed closely behind, but the monsters had already caught up. They frantically shot tail spikes as attacks. The soldiers without cover were all hit, and fell to the ground, crying out in pain. As the monsters were about to attack, bombs were about to be dropped in the area above. The injured soldier pushed everyone away with all his strength, and then provided covering fire to hold off the monsters. At this moment, the bombs detonated upon hitting the ground, and all the monsters in the tunnel were obliterated. David and the others were knocked unconscious by the shockwave. The remaining 3 woke up from their unconsciousness. They walked out of the tent, and found that this was a military base. Then David met the commander, and he was stunned to learn her name. It was none other than his daughter Helen. However, she didn't chat with David about family matters. Instead, she introduced him to the current situation. The female monsters existed like a queen ant, and in order to strengthen their colony, the male monsters protected the females very well. They used the pathogens they had brought back against the monsters, but the results showed that only the males died. The survival of the females meant they would continue to reproduce endlessly. At this rate, they could never kill them all. So their next mission was to capture a female monster alive, to develop a new pathogen toxin. Then they arrived at the lair where the female monster was hidden. They released a large amount of tranquilizer to restrict the monster's movements. Next, they wrapped it with rope. What no one expected was that the monster was still lively. It angrily swatted a soldier to death, and launched an attack on the others. As it was about to break free, Helen immediately descended from the helicopter, but she saw that the monster had already escaped its bindings, and was dragging a soldier back into its cave. Helen instructed the soldiers to use fire to flush it out. The monster surprisingly grabbed someone, and used them as a shield. It quickly emitted a distress signal to summon the male monsters. Taking advantage of the moment, Helen shot its tentacle. The monster felt pain, and released the soldier. The others immediately wrapped its tentacle with ropes. Seeing it couldn't win, the monster prepared to retreat into the cave. The group then coordinated to pull the monster into a cage, but the monster suddenly sprang up, and charged at Helen desperately. On the other side, David saw a large number of monsters charging towards them. He immediately jumped into the lair to help. Seeing the monster about to shoot tail spikes at his daughter, he quickly stepped forward and grabbed its tentacle, then changed direction to let the monster accidentally injure its own leg. Taking advantage of its leg injury, they quickly locked it in the cage, and they notified the helicopter to take off. The approaching monsters all jumped up, trying to grab the helicopter, but they were shredded into pieces by the rotor blades. At this moment, the helicopter that came to rescue Helen and the others arrived, but it was caught by a monster and crashed. The two hurriedly jumped into a nearby armored vehicle. In the end, they successfully fought their way back to the base. Then they used the captured monster to develop the toxin. Fortunately, they succeeded. Just then, the base suddenly sounded an alarm. A large number of monsters were attacking the base. It seemed they had come to rescue the female monster. Facing hundreds of meters high walls and deep water bombs, they still climbed up fearlessly, knowing that the base would soon fall. Helen handed the toxin to her father and took him to a high place to hide. If they can hold on for another 5 minutes, David will be sent back to the past. The toxin he held was the hope of all humanity. As long as he could return, he could stop everything. Meanwhile, a large number of monsters rushed into the laboratory and rescued the female monster. It seemed they knew about humanity's plan, and they chased after Helen. The father and daughter worked together to shoot down several monsters. Then they prepared to hide in the helicopter. However, Helen was struck down by a tail spike halfway there. David hurriedly shot the monster and rushed to check on his daughter's condition. Then he supported the injured Helen and continued to search for the helicopter. Suddenly, a runaway giant ship crashed into the base. Now the helicopter had been destroyed, and the base had completely fallen. Helen opened her heart to her father, saying she was actually very happy to see her father when he was young. Helen urged him to go back and prevent everything from happening. At this moment, the female monster came over, drawn by the scent. It lunged at the two of them. Suddenly, the platform collapsed, and the monster dragged Helen down with it. David desperately grabbed his daughter's hand. At this moment, the device indicated that there were only 10 seconds until teleportation. Helen let go of his hand. David jumped down, but he was suddenly transported back to the past. At this time, medical personnel rushed in to treat the injured. David tightly clutched the toxin and fainted. When he woke up, he told everyone to mass-produce this toxin and send it to the future to kill the monsters. However, the reply he received was that the teleportation device was damaged. They couldn't go to the future anymore. David was devastated by this news. Feeling that he had let down his daughter's expectations, he then returned home. Young Helen had prepared a gift for her father. That night, David told his wife that he had seen their daughter 25 years later, but as he spoke, he began to cry. His wife comforted him, saying there were other ways. She believed that the alien monsters might have already landed on Earth. Hearing this, David rekindled his hope. The next day, he found the teammate who had returned alive with a tail spike. They studied the tail spike. Unexpectedly, they made a discovery. The tail spike contained volcanic ash from China. Not understanding why this was the case, David sought out a student who studied volcanoes. The student stated that in the year 946 AD, the Changbai Mountain at the border of China and Korea had a massive volcanic eruption. The power of that eruption far exceeded that of 1,000 atomic bombs. Only such an eruption could send ash to northern Russia. This meant that the monsters had already come to Earth at that time. Then, based on various deductions, they found the location of the alien spaceship. Everyone immediately set off to Russia with the mass-produced toxins. After much hardship, they finally found the spaceship. In order to eliminate the monsters in their cradle, they used the toxin on the still sleeping monsters. The monster let out a painful howl and died in front of everyone. But before dying, it released a distress signal. Other monsters awakened prematurely in response. A few monsters charged out. The guards outside fired wildly at them. But at a critical moment, Kevin's gun malfunctioned. Fortunately, Kevin reacted quickly and prevented the monster from destroying the other toxins. After a while, David came out to get the toxin, only to find that the guards outside were gone. Meanwhile, others discovered that almost all the monsters had awakened. They had to use explosives to wipe out all the monsters in one go. For the bright future of humanity, they willingly sacrificed themselves. Outside, David heard the noise and ran away. Not far away, he saw two people guarding outside the cave. They reported that the largest monster had escaped. Upon hearing this, David realized it was a female monster. Now they must kill it immediately and not let it lay eggs. Then the group followed the footprints left by the monster to lure out the hidden monster. They set up traps. Soon, a hungry monster came out to forage. The old man immediately fired a shot in this direction, but the monster's thick skin was unaffected. Instead, it angered the monster, which charged at the old man. At a crucial moment, David hit it with a snowmobile. Then the two concentrated their fire, and shot wildly at the monster. Despite firing so many shots, the monster only sustained superficial wounds. Then it vanished from their sight. The white snow provided perfect camouflage for the monster. The two dared not split up recklessly, so they stood back to back in a defensive stance. Suddenly, when the monster showed itself, the two counterattacked together, but the monster was too powerful. It seized the opportunity to shoot a tail spike through David's leg. Then it lunged forward, ready to eat him. David immediately pulled out the tail spike and stabbed it towards the monster's eye. The old man attacked the other eye. The monster, now blind, let out a series of roars. It began to launch tail spikes indiscriminately. David quickly injected the toxin into its claw. However, the monster actually bit off its claws to prevent the spread of toxins. The old man used his blood to attract the monster. Meanwhile, David jumped onto the monster's back and cut its throat with a knife. The monster screeched in agony. The old man quickly moved in to hold its head. David poured the toxin into its mouth and kicked it away. Finally, the monster crashed into an iceberg and dissolved into a disgusting puddle of goo. The film ends here. The movie had excellent special effects and many explosive scenes. The plot was simple and complete. There were many foreshadowing elements in the film, but the pacing was too slow. Star-Lord's acting was beyond doubt, whether it's patriotism or the bond between father and daughter. His nuanced performance added a lot of realism to the characters. However, there were significant flaws in the setup. In the future, they even created a time machine, yet they still used such inferior weapons. A few grenade launchers could have solved the problem. Instead, they made a group of people from the past use rifles to die. I wouldn't recommend watching the original film. If you enjoy my channel, please click to subscribe.